The day my childhood ended, the sky was so blue, it felt like a lie. I was 12 when my father told me I'd be marrying a man 3 times my age. Andy. I remember thinking, so, this is how girls disappear. I grew up in a town so small, you could hear a dog bark on one side and know exactly which porch it came from. Harpersville, Georgia. Population maybe 200 souls, most of them stitched together by blood or debt. We lived off Route 84, about 15 miles outside of Valdosta, in a sagging, clapboard house that leaned like it was tired of being alive. My name is Leela Mae Carter, and before everything changed, my world was a patchwork of mud, magnolias, and Mama's warnings. We had one bathroom for 5 people, a kitchen with mismatched cabinets, and a porch that creaked like it remembered better days. I shared a room with my little sister and brother Maze and Joe, our beds lined up like matchsticks. We played with dolls made from rags and corn husks. Our idea of luxury was the rare Sunday when Mama gave us each a peppermint from the glass jar she kept high above the fridge. I was a quiet child, not shy, exactly, just careful. I listened more than I spoke, and I paid attention to the weight of things. How Daddy's boots sounded heavier on the porch when he was in trouble. How Mama's prayers got louder when the rain didn't come. How the air got strange before something bad happened. Mama, her name was Donna. Lee woke up every morning before the sun and whispered scripture while folding laundry. She believed in 2 things, God and hard work. Everything else, she said, was borrowed time. Daddy was Marvin Carter, a man of silence and dust. He farmed what land we had, sweet potatoes, some beans, and dreams that never made it out of the soil. When it didn't rain, and it hardly ever did those years, he'd just walk the fields, chewing the same toothpick, looking up at the sky like he wanted to fight it. I didn't know we were poor until I started noticing the way other kids looked at my shoes. I didn't know we were desperate until I heard my name in a conversation that wasn't meant for me. It was a Thursday, late July, and the heat was thick as honey. I was out back, playing by the clothesline with Maisie, when I heard my father's voice through the open window. "She's 12, Marvin," Mama said. Her voice had that sharp edge it got when she was trying not to cry. "I know that," Daddy muttered. "Don't think I don't know that." "Then how the hell?" "Because we're out of time, Donna. Jasper came again this morning. Said if I don't pay what I owe by Monday, he's taking the land." Jasper? Jasper Harlan. The man who ran the feed store and half the county's debt. He was tall, always wore pressed shirts, and smelled like cologne that didn't belong in places like ours. He had a scar across his cheekbone and a voice that could charm a snake or choke it. Mama didn't say anything for a long while. Then, "And what's he want?" "You already know." "No. He said he'd forgive the whole damn debt if no." "Marvin, no. He wants Lila." Everything in me froze. I don't remember dropping the doll from my hand, but I must have, because Maisie asked, "What's wrong?" I couldn't answer. I just stared at the house, at the kitchen window, at the voices pouring out of it like boiling water. "He said he'd wait," Daddy continued. "Said he wouldn't touch her. Said he'd treat her like a daughter till she's of age." I didn't know what of age meant, but I knew it was something that turned my stomach inside out. "You believe that?" Mama whispered. "I don't got the luxury not to." I backed away slowly, 1 foot at a time, my bare heels crunching the dried grass. I went out to the edge of the woods and sat on the stump by the creek, the one where we used to pretend we were queens. My heart beat so hard I thought maybe it'd just explode and end it all right there. They were going to give me away. To a man with sharp teeth and soft hands. To a man who once smiled at me too long at the church picnic. A man who said, "You're growing up real pretty," and made my stomach not even then. That night, I couldn't eat. Mama tried to put a biscuit on my plate, but I just shook my head. Daddy didn't look at me. Maisie and Joe didn't understand why everything was quiet and cold. After dinner, Mama said, "Lila, come on out to the porch with me." I followed her into the dusk. The crickets were singing, and the fireflies were starting to blink across the yard. She sat down on the swing, and I stood with my arms crossed. "You heard," she said. I nodded. "It's not what you think." "Yes, it is." She reached for my hand. I pulled away. "We don't have a choice, baby. There's always a choice," I said. "You just picked the wrong one." I didn't mean to sound so angry, but I was. Angry at the heat, at the debt, at Daddy's silence, at her for not fighting harder. She wiped her eyes. "I married young too," she said. 15. Didn't want to, but it worked out. I didn't respond. "He's gonna wait," she said. "You'll have time." Time for what? To learn how to be a wife before I learned what I liked for breakfast? That night, I cried into the same pillow I'd hugged since I was 6. I bit my hand to keep from waking Maisie. I whispered my own kind of prayer not to be saved, just to be seen. But God didn't answer. Or if he did, it was in the silence. By Sunday morning, everything was set. You ever see a bride whose shoes don't reach the floor when she sits? That was me, knees swinging in a borrowed dress, waiting to be signed away like property at a cattle auction. The Sunday morning they took me to the courthouse. The whole world felt like it was holding its breath. Mama woke me up before sunrise, her hands already smelling like starch and nervous sweat. She'd spent the night ironing an old cream-colored dress that used to belong to Aunt Clara. It was long in the sleeves, short at the hem, and still smelled faintly of mothballs. "It'll do," she whispered, not meeting my eyes. The mirror over our dresser was cracked on the top right corner, just enough to split my reflection into pieces. I looked at myself in that glass and didn't see a girl or a bride. I saw something unfinished. A draft of a person, not yet meant for the world. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Daddy was outside, sitting on the porch swing with a cigarette, even though he'd quit smoking years ago. He didn't say a word when I passed him to get to the truck. Just stared out into the woods, like maybe he'd disappear into them if he tried hard enough. Jasper Harlan was already waiting by the old Ford. He wore a dark suit and a red tie that looked like it had never seen dust or dirt. It sat too bright against the dull brown of everything around us. He smiled at me like we were about to go to a school dance. "You look mighty fine, Miss Leela," he said. I didn't answer. I climbed into the truck like a prisoner walks to the cell slow cold, and not really in their own body anymore. The ride into town was silent. I sat between Mama and Daddy, shoulders stiff, hands folded so tight my knuckles turned white. The road was bumpy, filled with potholes and patches of gravel, and every jolt made my stomach jump. I stared at the horizon and tried not to think about the fact that my whole life was only a mile or two away from being someone else's possession. The Valdosta courthouse wasn't much to look at. Brick walls, double wooden doors, and a smell like moldy paper and floor wax. The clerk behind the desk had tired eyes and a mug that said, "I hate Mondays," even though it was Sunday. He glanced at Jasper, then at me, then at the papers. "She's 12, turned 12 last week," Daddy muttered. The clerk frowned. "You sure about this?" My wife and I both signed. "It's legal." The man looked at me, really looked. I don't know what he saw. Maybe he saw the swing of my legs, not long enough to reach the floor. Maybe he saw the way my eyes didn't blink. Maybe he just saw a kid with a storm behind her ribs. "You don't have to say yes, sweetheart," he said quietly. I opened my mouth. I really did. I opened it and tried to speak, but the words sat like stones in my throat. My mama put her hand on my knee, like that would make it easier. Like silence was the kindest thing I could offer anyone in that room. "I do," I said. Barely a whisper. Jasper said it louder. "I do," like he was proud of it. And that was that. No flowers, no guests, no music, just ink on paper and the weight of something ancient pressing down on my chest. Outside, the sun had climbed halfway into the sky. The air was thick, still. I remember thinking, I'm somebody's wife now. But I didn't feel older or wiser or anything at all. I just felt blank. He drove us to his place in a new truck. Not the dusty farm Ford we'd grown up with, but one with shiny chrome and a leather smell that made my stomach turn. "I got you your own room," he said. I didn't answer. His house sat on land that rolled out like a rug, acres of cotton fields and pine trees. The place was nice, too nice, like someone trying to prove something. He showed me the room. Pale green walls, a bed with a frilly cover, a small bookshelf with old paperbacks and a Bible. "This'll be yours until the time comes." I sat on the edge of the bed and nodded. My knees didn't reach the floor there either. "Your mama packed you some clothes and things," he said, placing a small suitcase by the dresser. Then he hesitated, like maybe he remembered I was 12. "I'll let you settle in. Dinner's at 6. You like chicken pot pie?" I didn't answer. I just stared out the window, watching the cotton sway like it had no idea the world had ended. The days blurred. I wasn't allowed to go back home. Not even for a visit. Mama called once a week. We'd talk for a few minutes while Jasper stood nearby, pretending to read the paper. "You settling in?" she asked once. "I guess. You got everything you need." I paused. "No, but I've got everything he wants me to have." She didn't say anything after that. I woke up every morning to the sound of the rooster out back and the smell of coffee. Jasper made his own breakfast. I was allowed to stay in my room till after he left for work. I cleaned the kitchen, washed the floors, fed the dog. In the afternoons, I read the same 5 books over and over again. Charlotte's Web, Old Yeller, Little Women, a romance paperback I didn't understand, and the Bible. Every week, he brought me another book. He'd place it on the table like a peace offering. "This one's about horses. You like horses?" I nodded. Because what else could I do? He didn't touch me. Not in those early months. But his presence was heavy. Like rain that never fell, but always threatened. Sometimes I'd hear him outside my door at night, breathing, just breathing, like he didn't know whether to knock or run. And me. I lay in bed like a statue, eyes open, fists clenched, waiting. Waiting for the knock that never came. Waiting for the end of something that had only just begun. But the worst part, the part I still dream about, even now, was not the silence or the fear. It was the pretending. The pretending that this was normal. That this was what girls were made for. I was 12 years old. 12. And everyone around me, my family, the law, the church ladies who brought casseroles and said, "Bless her heart," they all acted like this was just another chapter in the story of a girl from Harpersville. But I knew, deep in my bones, I knew this wasn't a chapter. It was a theft. And the girl I'd been, she was gone. You don't notice time passing when every day looks the same. But even in the deepest winter, something always finds a way to bloom. At first, I counted the days like a prisoner marking lines in stone. The first week, then the first month. Then my first birthday inside Jasper's house. 13 candles I didn't get to blow out. 13 years I didn't get to feel. No cake, no presents. Just a quiet, happy birthday, Lila in the hallway, as if that made it better. As if saying it was enough. By spring, I stopped counting. I stopped measuring days in hours and started measuring them in chores. Feed the dog, sweep the porch, iron the pillowcases, even though no one would see them but me. He bought me new books sometimes. That was the only light that ever got through the cracks. I read everything like I was starving, like I could eat the words and grow something real out of them. One day, I found an old dictionary in a box in the attic. It was missing half the pages and smelled like mildew, but I treated it like treasure. I started learning one word a day, just one. Resilience, defiance, obligation, escape. Each word was a stone in a path I hadn't built yet. I don't know when I started writing in the margins of the books. Little notes to myself, tiny rebellions. On the inside cover of Little Women, I scribbled, "I am not someone's project. I am someone." I wasn't brave yet, but I was waking up. The first person to see that was Pearl. Pearl Ellis lived down the road and ran the closest thing. Harpersville had to a post office an old shed, with a blue mailbox and a table inside, where she sorted what little mail came through. She was in her 60s, wore lipstick so red it looked like fire, and smoked like she didn't care if her lungs hurt her. She started coming around in early summer, said she was checking on folks. Said Jasper had mentioned I might need some company now and then. He didn't say it kindly. He said it like I was a chore he didn't know how to finish. The first time she knocked, I nearly jumped out of my skin. "You Lila?" she asked, flicking her cigarette into the dirt. I nodded. "Well, I'm Pearl. I brought you some fig preserves. Hope you like sweet things." I didn't know what to say. I hadn't had a real conversation with another woman in months. She handed me the jar and said, "You always this quiet?" "No, ma'am," I said. "Only lately." She chuckled, and something about her made me feel like maybe I didn't have to be invisible all the time. "You read?" she asked. "A lot?" "Good. Smart girls stay alive." She looked me up and down, not in a mean way, but in that way women do when they're checking for bruises you don't talk about. "Where's Jasper?" "Out working the East Field." "Good," she said. "Man don't need to be around for us to talk." And talk we did. It started as small things, whether the garden, the heat, but slowly, she started sneaking questions in. "How long you been here? You like it? You see your mama much?" I told her the truth in pieces. Not everything, not yet, but enough. "I was 12, I said one afternoon, as we shelled peas together on the porch. "When I got here," she paused. "Jesus." I shrugged like it didn't matter. Like I hadn't cried in that same porch swing just the week before, begging the sky to open and swallow me. "You ever think about going to school?" she asked. "All the time." "Well then, why don't you?" I looked at her like she was joking. "I'm not allowed to leave the property without him." "You ever think maybe you don't need permission?" I didn't know how to answer that. I'd never been asked to imagine a world where I didn't ask first. Pearl didn't push, but she kept coming back. Every week. Sometimes with jam, sometimes with paperbacks. Sometimes with stories about her sister who'd run away to Atlanta and became a teacher. She left with $15 and a pocket knife, she said once. Told no one. Not even her husband. Where'd she go? Anywhere she wanted. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and imagined a world outside Route 84. A city with traffic lights and bookstores. People who didn't know me. People who didn't look at me like I was a debt paid in flesh. What if I could leave? What if I could be something? I started saving money. Quietly, carefully. Jasper gave me change sometimes for the groceries. I kept a few dollars here and there, folded them into pages of books, hid them inside the lining of my suitcase. Once, I found a crumpled 20 in the laundry, forgotten in his pants. I kept that, too. I was done waiting for permission. Pearl brought me a notebook one week. "Write it down," she said. "Everything. The truth, the dreams, the ugly stuff. Don't let it rot inside you." I did. Late at night, with a stub of a pencil, I wrote in the margins of silence, "I am Lila Mae Carter. I am not his wife. I am not his prisoner. I am something else." That journal became my salvation. No one could read it but me. No one could touch it. It was the only place I could say everything without fear. I started writing letters, too. Never sent them. One to Mama, one to myself, one to God, and one to the girl I might be someday. "Dear Lila," I wrote, "I hope you made it out. I hope you learned to laugh again. I hope your voice came back. By the time I was 14, I'd saved enough for a bus ticket to anywhere. I kept the cash in an envelope taped to the bottom of my dresser drawer. Jasper never checked. He wasn't cruel in the way you might expect. He wasn't violent, but he was absent in every way that mattered. He treated me like a hired hand. Someone to cook, clean, and sit in silence. The space between us was filled with ghosts. The ghost of whatever girl he thought he was buying, and the ghost of the child I'd been when I walked into his house. But I was learning. I was sharpening myself. And one day, soon I would walk away. Not in the dark, not in shame, but in daylight, head high, name intact. Voice loud enough to break the windows. When you grow up in a house that teaches you to be quiet, even your hope learns how to whisper. But one day, that whisper grows teeth. It was mid-July, 2 years after I'd said I do to a man 3 times my age. I was 14, but most days I felt ancient. The Georgia heat wrapped around everything like wet wool, the kind that didn't let you breathe easy. Jasper had gone out early that morning, said something about picking up a part for the well pump, but I didn't ask details. I never asked much anymore. We lived like ghosts passing in the hallway. I cleaned the kitchen, fed the chickens, and opened the back screen door to let the breeze in, not because it helped the heat, but because the silence needed company. Pearl hadn't been by in 2 weeks. Her sister had taken sick in Thomasville, and she'd gone to help. She left me with a tin of sugar cookies and a kiss on the cheek. "You're stronger than you think," she'd whispered before driving off. That day, I was dusting the bookshelf when I heard a car I didn't recognize pull up the drive. Not Jasper's, not Pearl's. It was a red sedan, paint faded, with a passenger side mirror held on by duct tape. And behind the wheel was a boy, or maybe a man. I couldn't tell. He got out, long legs in faded jeans, white t-shirt soaked through with sweat. He looked around like he wasn't sure he was in the right place. Then he knocked. 3 slow raps on the screen door. I wiped my hands on my apron and stepped onto the porch. "Can I help you?" I asked. He took a step back like he was surprised to see someone my age. Yeah, I think so. I'm looking for Jasper Harlan, my uncle." "Your what? Your uncle?" He nodded. "My mama's brother. I'm Will, William Tucker. Folks just call me Will." That name meant nothing to me. Jasper never mentioned family. In fact, he never mentioned much of anything. "Well, he ain't home," I said. Will pushed his hands into his pockets. "Drove all the way from Augusta. Guess my timing sucks." I didn't say anything. He looked around. "You live here?" I nodded. "You his?" "Housekeeper," I said quickly. It came out so fast I surprised myself. Not wife, not girl, not anything. Just housekeeper. Will squinted. "You don't look like no housekeeper. I keep the house. That's all that matters." We stood there for a beat too long. Then he smiled a little. "You got any water? Car's about to melt into the gravel?" I nodded and brought him a glass. He drank it in 3 long gulps. "Hotter than hell out here," he muttered. "Welcome to Harpersville," I said, folding my arms. He grinned. "Yeah, well, guess every place has its own kind of hell." I didn't know why I liked him immediately. Maybe because he didn't look at me like I was furniture, or glass, or a mistake. He looked at me like I was real, like I had a name. Jasper came back a couple hours later. He parked behind Will's car and climbed out, already frowning. "What are you doing here?" he asked before the door even shut. Will straightened up. "Nice to see you too, Uncle Jay. You didn't call." "You don't own a phone." "I didn't invite you," Will shrugged. "Didn't come to be invited, just came." I stood to the side while they talked. Jasper barely acknowledged me. That night, Will stayed in the guest room. Said he'd only be there a couple nights, maybe less. Jasper wasn't thrilled, but he let it happen. Will helped with dinner, washed his own plate, sat across from me, and asked about books. "You read To Kill a Mockingbird yet?" he asked. I shook my head. He looked shocked. "You gotta, it's like, sacred. I've got it in the car. I'll bring it in tomorrow." And he did. The next day, he handed me a paperback, so worn the cover was barely hanging on. "This book'll teach you something important," he said. "Like what?" "That some folks have all the power, and some folks have all the heart. But the world only listens to one of them." I read it in 2 days. After that, we talked more. Just in the kitchen. Just when Jasper was gone. He never crossed a line. Never said anything he shouldn't. But he listened. He saw me. And I started to come undone. It was a week later when it happened. Jasper came home early. Earlier than expected. Will and I were at the kitchen table, laughing about something small. I can't even remember what. But it was real laughter. The kind I hadn't made in years. The door slammed. What the hell's this? I stood up so fast, my chair scraped the floor. Nothing, I said. We were just... I asked him. Will interrupted. If he wanted sweet tea. Jasper's eyes flicked from me to Will, and back again. He wasn't stupid. He knew what he saw, even if it wasn't what he thought it was. Outside? Now, he said to me. I followed him. My heart was pounding. He didn't hit me. He never did. But his voice could gut you. You think I don't see what's going on? You think I'm blind? There's nothing going on, I said. He stepped closer. You forget who you are in this house, girl. I'm your wife, I said. And my voice cracked. Forced or not, that's what you made me. His face twisted. Not in rage, but in shame. He stepped back like I'd slapped him. You got no right to throw that in my face. I got every right, I whispered, because I'd stayed silent long enough. I was 12. You think I chose this? He looked away. You could have left by now, he said. You could have left me. We didn't speak for the rest of the night. Will left the next morning. Said he had somewhere to be. Didn't say where. Just left the book on the kitchen table. Underneath it was a note. You don't belong here, Lila. You belong somewhere big. Don't let anyone tell you different. That night, I took out the envelope of money, counted every dollar, every dime. I had enough. I had more than enough. I stared at the wall for hours, trying to decide if I was brave, if I was stupid, if I was ready. Then I packed. Just the essentials. Notebook, money, toothbrush, the worn-out copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. And before the sun came up, I walked out the door and down the gravel drive. I didn't leave a note, didn't look back. The birds were just starting to wake. The air smelled like dew and pine and something holy. Freedom. They tell you freedom tastes like fresh air, like rain on your skin. But the first breath of it can burn like acid when you've never been allowed to breathe. I walked 6 miles before the sun had a chance to burn the fog off the road. No one followed. No one called my name. I had a wad of bills stuffed in my bra, a backpack slung over one shoulder, and a half-sandwich Pearl had packed me a week before just in case. I didn't know where I was going, not exactly, but I knew how to get to the Greyhound station in Valdosta. Pearl had shown me once, tracing her finger over the map with a glint in her eye. That's your way out, she'd said, tapping the tiny bus icon. Someday, that someday was now. When I got there, my legs were trembling from the walk. My shoes were wet with dew, and I was coated in a layer of sweat and courage I didn't know I had. The woman behind the ticket window didn't ask why a 14-year-old was traveling alone. She barely looked up. One way or round trip? I hesitated. One way. To where? I stared at the big board overhead cities and times blinking slowly. My eyes landed on the name I'd heard Pearl say 100 times. Savannah. She typed it in without question. $32. I slid the crumpled bills under the glass. She gave me a ticket and a paper schedule. Bus leaves in 15. I sat on the cracked vinyl bench and stared at the stained floor. A fly buzzed somewhere near the window. A man was asleep under his coat across from me. A mother fed Cheerios to her toddler in slow motion. The whole room smelled like wet cardboard and diesel. It felt like heaven. When the bus pulled in, I climbed the steps, handed the driver my ticket, and picked a window seat near the back. I pulled the curtain halfway shut, rested my forehead on the cool glass, and whispered to myself, "You did it." But the thing is, doing it doesn't mean you're done. Freedom isn't magic. It's just the first page of a brand new book. And the beginning is always the hardest part. The city was bigger than anything I'd ever seen. Savannah had these big mossy trees that hung over the streets like ghosts trying to tell secrets. Brick sidewalks, houses with iron gates and porches stacked like wedding cakes. I'd never seen so many people in one place who didn't know me, and that, somehow, made me feel safe. No one here knew I was Leela Mae Carter, married at 12 and gone at 14. No one looked at me with pity or suspicion. They didn't look at me at all. I stayed quiet, moved slow, kept my head down. I had a name, but I didn't say it much. I found a cheap motel near the river. Paid for one night in cash. The man at the front desk didn't ask questions. He gave me a key and pointed down the hallway. Room 103 smelled like mildew and old smoke. The carpet was thin as a handkerchief. The bedspread had cigarette burns. But it had a lock on the door and a bathroom of my own. I sat on the edge of the bed and cried for the first time since I left Jasper's house. Not little girl tears, not quiet sobs, but deep, guttural, body-shaking grief. I wasn't crying because I missed him. I was crying because the weight was finally off, and I didn't know who I was without it. I spent the next few days walking, not wandering, not lost, just breathing. I walked through the parks, under the trees, past the shops with signs I couldn't pronounce. I watched couples sip coffee and students carry backpacks. I watched women laugh in groups and old men read the paper on benches. And for the first time in my life, I saw what it meant to belong to no one. I was a girl with no anchor. That kind of freedom? It's terrifying. You don't realize how much of your life is planned until no one's planning it anymore. I had no idea how to rent an apartment, how to find a job, how to open a bank account, how to explain anything to anyone without unraveling. So I did what I knew how to do. I cleaned the motel maid. Her name was Trina. Caught me scrubbing the bathroom one morning with my own rag. "Girl, what you doing?" I stood up, panicked. I just, you trying to steal my job?" "No, it was dirty." She raised an eyebrow, then she laughed. "Damn, you got skills." I smiled for the first time in days. Trina was tall, black, and sharp as a tack. Wore gold hoops and neon sneakers and didn't take crap from anyone. She worked 2 jobs and had 3 kids. "You got somewhere to be?" she asked me the next day. I shook my head. "You want work?" "Yes." And just like that, I started shadowing her. First, at the motel. Then, at the diner, she worked nights. I washed dishes. I mopped. I took out trash. I didn't complain. Didn't talk much, either. But Trina noticed things. "You got secrets, don't you?" she said once, pouring sweet tea into a jug. I didn't answer. "That's fine. Just don't let M eat you alive." She started giving me cash at the end of every week. Not much, but enough to keep me from going hungry. Enough to save a little. She let me crash on her couch after the motel money ran out. Her apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, and loud music. Kids, the sound of life happening, but it felt like a heartbeat. I turned 15 in her living room. Her daughter Nia baked a box cake with blue frosting. They lit a candle, sang off-key. I cried again. But this time, it was different. It wasn't grief. It was gratitude. "You ain't gotta tell me what you ran from," Trina said that night as we washed dishes side by side. "But promise me you won't run forever." "What do you mean?" "I mean, you gotta stop surviving at some point. You gotta start living." I nodded, but I didn't know how. Not yet. Living, I'd learn, is its own kind of battle, and I was only just beginning to fight. Just when you think you've outrun the past, it finds you in a whisper, not a scream. And sometimes, freedom starts to feel like another kind of prison, just one without walls. 2 months into living with Trina, I almost forgot I had come from a life where silence was survival. Almost. I had a routine now. Wake up before sunrise, help Trina pack school lunches for her kids. walk to the diner for the early shift, then spend afternoons helping at the motel. I scrubbed, folded, rinsed, served, swept. Every dollar I made, I saved. I had a new hiding spot new in an empty Maxwell House coffee can under Trina's kitchen sink, behind the bleach and old sponges. I counted that money every Sunday night, held it in my hands like a talisman. I told myself I'd use it for something big, for a room of my own, for classes, for anything that felt like a step forward. But I didn't know what forward really looked like. Some nights I just lay awake staring at the ceiling fan, wondering if I was doing it all wrong, wondering if the freedom I fought for was just a new kind of lonely. I didn't have a last name to give anyone. I couldn't fill out a form without lying. I didn't exist. Not really, not in any official way. I had no ID, no social security card, no medical records. Just a name I only whispered to myself, Lila Mae Carter. And the only proof I had of who I used to be was a wiggered notebook filled with secrets and a paperback that smelled like old paper and teenage rebellion. To Kill a Mockingbird stayed under my pillow every night, like a friend who never asked questions. One afternoon, I was working the late shift at the diner when I saw something that nearly knocked the air out of my lungs. 2 police officers walked in. Now, normally, that wouldn't mean much. Cops came in all the time, ate burgers, drank coffee, left bad tips. But this time, they were looking around. Talking low, I ducked behind the counter. Trina saw me. Her eyes narrowed, sharp and fast. "Go to the back," she mouthed. I did. I pushed through the swinging doors into the kitchen and stood there, heart hammering in my ears, trying to breathe. A million thoughts raced through me. Did someone find me? Did Jasper report me missing after all? Did they track me here? Did I leave a trail? 10 minutes later, Trina came through the door like a storm. "They're gone," she said. "What did they want?" "They were just asking about a girl. Said they had a welfare check request. Didn't say your name, but they showed a photo." My stomach turned. Was it me? She didn't answer right away. "Trina, was it me?" She exhaled slowly. "You were younger in it, hair in braids, but yeah, it was you." I leaned against the wall, shaking. "You think it was Jasper?" "I don't know, baby. But if he's looking, it means you rattled something." I covered my face with both hands. "What do I do?" "You got options," she said. "You can stay, lie low, keep quiet. Or what? Or we make you real." That night, after her kids went to bed, we sat at the kitchen table under the dim bulb, and Trina pulled out a shoebox full of documents. "I had a cousin once who had to start over," she said. "Not like you, but close enough. He got clean, left the gang, wanted a new life. Took us a year, but we made it happen. I'm gonna do for you what we did for him." I looked at her, confused. "How?" "Well, first, we need someone who knows someone. I got a friend at the community center, works with kids in the system. Might help us get you a birth certificate. Then, we file for a school ID. Then we get you a real name on paper." "You mean lie?" "I mean survive." I stared at my hands. "I don't want to stop being Lila." "You won't. You'll just make it official in a way that don't put you in handcuffs." Over the next few weeks, we built me brick by brick. The first time I wrote the new name down on a piece of paper, I cried. Lila Mae Tucker. Tucker, from Will Trina, had offered her last name. But something in me said no. It didn't feel like mine. Will's did. Even if he was gone. Even if I never saw him again. He was the first person who made me believe I could be something besides trapped. We got the birth certificate through someone at the county office who owed Trina a favor. A church lady helped with the school enrollment. A bus pass followed. And just like that, Ty was back in the classroom, 15 years old, sitting in the back row of a GED prep course with 20-year-olds who smelled like weed and regret. I didn't care. I was there. With a notebook, with pencils, with hope. It was during that time I started writing again. Not just in the margins of books, but real writing. Poems, paragraphs, pages and pages of memories I didn't know I still carried. One day, our teacher, Mrs. Whitaker, assigned us an essay, write about the moment that changed your life. I stared at the blank paper for an hour. Then I wrote, I was 12 when I stopped being a child. The moment didn't feel big. There was no thunder, no yelling, just the sound of my father saying, we don't have another choice. When I handed it in, I expected silence. Instead, Mrs. Whitaker called me up after class. I don't know where you've been, she said, eyes glassy, but I know you're going somewhere. I swallowed hard. Have you ever thought about writing? For real? For real? She nodded. There's a scholarship. It's small, but it gets you into a summer program at the university. You live on campus. You write, you learn. The idea stunned me. Live on campus. Be a student. Tell the truth. I applied. Didn't tell Trina at first. I didn't think I'd get it. But a month later, a letter came in the mail. I stared at the envelope like it might bite me. Then I opened it, and there it was. Congratulations. You've been selected for the 10-week summer intensive at Savannah State University. Trina cried when I told her. Girl, you better go live that life. I didn't clean motel bathrooms for 20 years so you could stay stuck here with me. I hugged her like she was my mother. She hugged me back like she'd known me since birth. You go, she whispered. But don't forget who you are. I smiled. I'm Lila Mae Tucker. No, she said. You're Lila Mae Carter, too. And both of those girls deserve to live. The first time someone called me a writer, I looked over my shoulder, thinking they meant someone else. It's a strange thing to finally walk in the direction of your own name and not feel like an imposter. The summer I turned 16, I packed a suitcase that didn't smell like sorrow. 2 pairs of jeans, a few shirts, a notebook, and a pen Trina gave me the night before I left. It was silver, a little too heavy, and engraved with the words, use your voice, even if it shakes. Savannah State's campus was a world I'd only seen in dreams. Big brick buildings, long hallways, bulletin boards covered in posters for open mics and poetry readings. Kids my age sprawled across the lawn with earbuds and laptops, laughing like they'd never been told to be quiet. I walked in like a ghost, silent, watchful, afraid of being asked where I'd come from. But nobody asked. Nobody cared. For the first time, that felt like grace. The writing program had 20 students. Some of them had been writing since they were 9. Some had blogs. Some came from magnet schools where they wrote essays that got national awards. Me, I had a notebook full of pain and a voice I wasn't sure belonged. But then I met Marcy. She was short, loud, and had a laugh that shook walls. She wore thrift store dresses and combat boots and said things like, I don't trust any poem that doesn't bleed. She became my roommate, my first real friend since Madalena. The first night we stayed up till 2 a.m. reading each other's stories out loud. She stopped after one of me in a piece about a girl who cooked breakfast for a man who never looked her in the eye. Lila, she said, soft now, that's not fiction, is it? I didn't answer. She didn't push. She just said, keep writing. And I did. Every day. At the cafeteria. In the library. Sitting in the grass behind the dorm. It wasn't always about the past. Sometimes I wrote about what I hoped for: teeny apartments filled with books, train rides to cities I hadn't seen, hands I could hold without flinching. One day, our professor, Dr. Shore, pulled me aside after class. He was an older man with wild hair and eyes that saw too much. You've got something, he said. I laughed, nervous. I've got a lot of trauma. No, he said. You've got rhythm, insight, your sentences breathe. That can't be taught. I blinked back tears. I don't know what to do with it. Keep writing. Don't stop. Ever. And apply for the long program. The what? Creative writing track? Starts next fall. We have scholarships. I'll help. I nodded, dumbstruck. It was happening. The future wasn't just a blank space anymore. It had edges, names, color. On weekends, I called Trina from the campus phone. She always answered on the second ring. "How's my baby genius?" I told her about my stories, my classes, Marcy, the professor who believed in me. She told me Naya was reading now, and Isaiah was playing drums in the school band. "I miss you," I said one night. "We're always here," she said, "but don't come back unless it's to show off." That summer changed me. Not all at once, not loudly, but slowly, quietly, like moss taking hold on brick, like sunlight warming skin that forgot what warmth felt like. I started applying to things, local magazines, youth contests, small grants. I wrote essays about girls like me, girls no one wrote about. I wrote fiction that wasn't fiction, memoirs that were just truth in disguise. People started listening. One of my essays got accepted by a small online magazine. It was called What They Took and What I Took Back. It was about Jasper, about walking out, about finding power in a name you weren't given, but chose. It got shared more than I ever expected. People wrote to me, girls in Idaho, women in Texas, grandmothers in Maine. One email said, "I thought I was the only one." I printed that message and taped it to the inside of my notebook. Because sometimes, being seen is the first proof that you exist. Toward the end of the program, Marcy and I snuck out one night and walked to the edge of the marsh, where the moon hit the water just right and made it look like glass. She lit a cigarette she never smoked and said, "You ever wonder what your life would have been like if none of that happened?" I stared out at the black water. I used to, and now, I think, if it hadn't happened, I might never have found my voice. But sometimes, I still wish I'd found it a different way. She nodded. "I get that." Then she turned to me. "You know you're gonna be big, right?" I laughed. "Like how big? Like bookstore big? Author jacket big? Oprah's book club big?" "Don't say that." "Why not?" "Because it makes it real." She grinned. "Exactly." On the last day of the program, Dr. Shore handed me a letter. "You're in?" he said. "In what?" "The fall cohort. Full ride." My knees went weak. "You're gonna be the youngest in the class, but probably the loudest on the page." I hugged him before I could stop myself, and he let me. That night, I sat alone in the dorm room. Marcy already gone home for the week. I took out my notebook and opened to the first page. The very first thing I ever wrote when I arrived in Savannah. I am not his wife. I am not their shame. I am a girl with a voice and a name and a pen that will not stop. I crossed it out, not because it wasn't true, but because it was time for a new beginning. I wrote, "My name is Lila Mae Carter. I used to survive. Now I live." The past doesn't knock when it wants to come back. It slips in through the cracks, the places you forgot to board up. And sometimes, the final step in healing is facing the people who broke you. I was 17 the morning the letter arrived. It wasn't addressed to Lila Mae Carter or Lila Mae Tucker. Just LM in shaky blue ink on a yellow envelope. No return address, no stamp. Hand-delivered, it had been slipped under my door sometime during the night. At first, I thought it was from Marcia maybe, a joke, maybe a poem, something clever. But the handwriting, I'd seen it before. Somewhere between report cards and grocery lists. Somewhere in a kitchen where I was taught to say yes instead of no. It was my mother's. I didn't open it right away. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding the envelope like it might catch fire in my hands. I hadn't thought about Donna Lee Carter in months. Maybe longer. When I walked out that morning before sunrise 3 years ago, she hadn't tried to stop me. She hadn't even looked me in the eye. She just stood there on the porch, wringing the hem of her apron like she was afraid to touch me. Maybe she was. Maybe I reminded her of all the ways she didn't fight for me. I opened the letter with a butter knife, slowly, like it might bite. Inside was a folded sheet of notebook paper, torn from a spiral. Smelled like her. Lila Mae. I heard you're in Savannah. Word gets around. Don't worry. I didn't tell no one. Not even your daddy. He's not well. We ain't well. I guess you know that. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I know that don't fix nothing. I know I shoulda stopped it. I shoulda said no. But I was scared and tired, and I thought I was doing what had to be done. That don't make it right. You were a child. My child, if you ever want to come back. Not to stay. Just to see where it started. The house is still there. I'm still there, waiting. Love, Mama. I sat there for a long time. Long enough for the coffee on my desk to go cold. Long enough for the sunlight to stretch across the floor like a slow answer. And then I cried. Not because I forgave her. Not because I was angry. But because part of me still needed a mother. Even after all of it. I didn't go right away. I went to class. I went to the library. I pretended to be the same Leela who could recite Baldwin from memory and argue about Toni Morrison and run circles around the boys in workshop. But the letter followed me. It sat in my backpack like a second spine. It sat in my chest like a borrowed breath. Marcy noticed. You okay? She asked one night while we sat in the laundry room, waiting on her socks to dry. Yeah, I lied. She didn't press. Just handed me a Snickers bar and said, whatever it is, you'll write through it. You always do. I did try. Wrote half a short story about a girl who grew wings and then cut them off because she missed the weight of chains. Wrote a poem that started with my mama sold me like a cow and ended with but I still think of her when I see aprons. Nothing stuck. Nothing felt like enough. So finally, one cold Saturday in January, I bought a bus ticket and went home. Not for her, not even for me, but for the ghost of the girl I used to be the one who never got to say goodbye. The Carter house was smaller than I remembered. The porch sagged more. The paint had chipped off in strips like peeled sunburn. The chicken coop was empty. The swing I used to sit on had one rope broken and hung sideways, like it gave up mid-swing. I stood at the edge of the yard, heart pounding, fists tight. Then I walked up the steps and knocked. She opened the door like she'd been standing behind it all morning. She looked older. Not just tired, but worn. Like paper that's been folded too many times. Lila, she said. Mama. We stood there for a minute. Then she stepped aside. Come in. The kitchen was the same. Same checkered tablecloth. Same cracked sugar bowl. Same coffee stain on the counter from the time Daddy dropped the pot and cursed in front of us all. But something was different. The air didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a story someone else had written for me, and I'd finally stepped out of the last page. You want coffee? Sure. We sat at the table, 2 mugs between us, steam rising like ghosts. She didn't talk first. I did. Why now? She sighed. I guess I saw your name somewhere. On a piece someone printed out from the internet. A woman at church showed me. Didn't know it was you, but I did. I nodded. I didn't think you'd want to hear from me, she said. I didn't. She swallowed. But I'm here anyway, I added. She looked at me then. Really looked. Her eyes welled up. I should have stopped him. I should have told Jasper to go to hell. I should have grabbed you and run. Why didn't you? She shook her head. I don't know. I was raised to think a man's word was law. That debt was a kind of sickness and marriage was a cure. I was scared and weak. And I'm sorry. I stared at my coffee. I wanted you to fight for me. I know. I leaned back in the chair. You know what it felt like? Like I was something you gave away so we could keep the house. And now I don't even want the house. She wiped her face with her sleeve. I think about you every day. I think about me every day too. We sat in silence. The clock on the wall ticked like it had nothing to apologize for. Finally, she said, your daddy don't get out of bed much. Got sick? Lung stuff. He asks about you, but not out loud. I nodded. I don't hate you, I said, surprising even myself. But I don't think I can love you the same way anymore. She blinked. I'll take that, she whispered. It's more than I deserve. I finished my coffee, then I stood. She followed me to the door. "Thank you for coming," she said. I turned back. "You didn't raise a coward," I said. "Even if you didn't know it at the time." She smiled tearfully. "You always were the strongest thing in this house." I didn't go to see Jasper. He didn't earn that. But as the bus rolled out of town, I stared out the window at the fields we used to plant, the trees we used to climb, the road I used to walk barefoot with hope like a string in my fist. I thought about the version of me that almost stayed, the version that didn't run. She'd still be there, cooking, cleaning, waiting, and I realized something I hadn't before. I didn't just leave to save myself. I left to bury her, to make space for the girl I could become. And that girl, she was coming home to herself. Not to Harpersville, but to truth. Some stories don't end when the pain does. They keep blooming in the spaces where silence once lived. I returned to Savannah like someone waking from a fever dream. Different, but not broken. My body came back, carrying the same weight, but my hands were open. I wasn't clenching anything anymore. Not the anger, not the grief. Not the child I'd buried on that bus ride out of Harpersville. Back in my little apartment off Habersham Street, I opened every window. Let the air in, let the past out. I unpacked the yellow envelope Mama had mailed. I kept the letter inside my desk drawer, not because I planned to reread it often, but because part of healing is not pretending it never happened. That letter was proof. Not of guilt, but of recognition. She saw me, even if she was late. And in a life like mine, that counted for something. That fall, I started my first full semester in the creative writing program. I was the youngest in my cohort by 3 years. The only one who didn't come from a magnet school or prep program, or a family who filled bookshelves before they filled kitchen cabinets. But none of that mattered, because I wrote like I'd lived. And no amount of training can teach what survival carves into bone. My classmates noticed. My professors too. At first, I kept it surface level, fiction. Safe metaphors, characters with names that weren't mine. But one day in workshop, Professor Shore said something that stuck. "You can't write a story that matters if you're still hiding behind the fence." I went home that night and stared at a blank page until sunrise. And then I wrote the real thing. The essay I'd been avoiding for years. 12 years old, that was the title. No metaphor, no fiction. Just truth raw and plain as a slap. It started with, I was 12 when my father handed me over like an unpaid debt. And it ended with, but I got out. And I lived. And I will never teach my daughters to keep quiet. I submitted it to a regional contest I didn't expect to win. But I did. Then someone from a national literary magazine reached out asking to reprint it. Then the emails came. Hundreds. Thousands. Not all pretty. Some angry. Some defensive. Some that blamed me. But most were from girls. Girls in Nebraska. In Florida. In places I'd never been but knew too well. Girls who said things like, "Me too," but I never had the words for it. "You wrote this story I've been carrying in silence. Thank you. I thought it was just me." I cried, reading every one. Not because I was sad, but because I finally understood something no one tells you. Telling the truth doesn't just set you free, it sets fire to the cage. A few months later, I was asked to speak at a school just outside of Atlanta. They were holding an awareness week about forced marriage, teen autonomy, and education access. Someone on the planning committee had read my essay. I didn't want to go at first. Talking on paper is easy. But standing in front of strangers, that felt like undressing in public. Still, something in me said yes. Maybe it was the ghost of that 12-year-old girl still inside me, whispering, "Say it loud. Let someone hear it who needs to." So I went. I stood on a stage in a community gym. Lights too bright, microphone too loud, knees shaking behind a podium, someone decorated with flowers. I looked out and saw rows of teenage girls, some giggling, some bored, some staring with that hungry kind of quiet that told me they knew more than they were saying. And I spoke. I told them my story. From the beginning, the girl on the porch, the marriage, the silence, the escape, the pen. I didn't soften it. I didn't dramatize it. I just told the truth. And when I finished, the room was so still, I thought maybe they hadn't understood. Then one girl in the third row raised her hand. "What would you tell someone," she asked, "who hasn't left yet?" I swallowed hard. "Don't wait for permission," I said. "If you're breathing, you're allowed to leave. Even if you don't know where you'll go. Even if you're scared. Especially if you're scared." Another girl raised her hand. "How do you stop being angry at your parents?" That one hurt. I paused. "You don't stop being angry," I said. "You learn how to live with it without letting it rot you. You decide what kind of parent you want to be one day and you become that." When I walked off stage, a line of girls waited to talk to me. Some didn't say a word, just hugged me. Some handed me folded notes with trembling hands. One girl slipped a piece of paper into my palm that read, "I thought I was alone. Now I think maybe I'm not." I held it all in until I got back to my car. Then I broke, big, gasping sobs. Not from sadness, from relief, because every piece of pain I thought would destroy me had turned into a bridge, and other girls were walking across it. I graduated college at 22, first in my class. By then, I'd published 2 essays in major journals, spoken at a dozen schools, and signed with a literary agent. They said my story mattered. I said, all stories matter when girls get to tell them themselves. Trina came to my graduation, wore a dress with sequins, and cried through the entire ceremony. Afterward, she squeezed my hand and said, "You're not just free, Leela, you're fierce." Marcy flew in from Chicago, brought me a gift-a-leather journal and a necklace with a small silver bird. "It's not a cage," she said. "It's a promise." I wore it every day after that, a reminder of what I'd left behind and what I was flying toward. When you've spent half your life running, it's strange to wake up in a home you built yourself. Not a borrowed room, not a borrowed name, but a space where every corner knows you by heart. I'm 43 now. My hands don't shake when I hold a microphone anymore. My voice doesn't crack when I say the word child bride in front of strangers. I've stood on stages in New York, in Phoenix, in schools where girls wear sneakers with pride and never wonder if they belong to themselves. But it's not the stages that matter most. It's the quiet ones, the moments between. The notes left on hotel nightstands, the teenagers who wait till the hallway is empty, then whisper, "Can I ask you something?" The mothers who come to me after readings, eyes full of guilt, asking, "How do I make it right with my daughter?" Sometimes I tell them the truth. You may not be able to, but you can start by believing her. I live in a house just outside Atlanta now. 2 bedrooms, creaky floors, and a porch with a swing I installed myself. There are books on every surface. Mugs half full of cold coffee, a dog named Baldwin who howls when trains go by, and most days I write, not because I'm still healing, but because I made a promise to the girl I used to be. We won't be quiet anymore. I never married. People ask, sometimes gently, sometimes with that tilt in their head that says, "Don't you want someone?" I don't mind the question, but I don't need the answer to be anything other than this. I am not unfinished. I am not a chapter waiting on someone else's pen. I've loved people. I've kissed under street lamps and watched the stars from rooftops. I've held hands. I've let people in. But I've never belonged to anyone. And that, to me, is sacred. I do have a daughter, though not of blood, of choice. Her name is Riley. She came into my life at 15, angry and brilliant and quiet in the way that says, "I don't trust joy." She'd been shuffled through 6 foster homes, wrote poetry on the backs of receipts, asked questions like, "Why do people give up on girls like us?" I didn't have the answer, but I had space. A room, a bookshelf, an open door, and she walked through it. She's 22 now, Graduated college last spring. Her first book comes out next year. It's called The Sky Was Never Closed. When I asked where she got the title, she smiled and said, "You." I cried. Of course I did, because some of us grow up thinking survival is the goal, but the real goal, legacy. To live so honestly, so loudly, that someone else hears your story and realizes, wait, maybe I can, too. I still go back to Harpersville once a year, not for long. Just enough time to walk past the field where the swing used to hang, the corner where Mama sat stringing beans, the porch where I first heard my name spoken like a sacrifice. The house isn't standing anymore. It collapsed during a storm. Nothing left but foundation stones and broken boards. But I still go. I bring a flower. One. I place it where my bedroom used to be. And I whisper, "We made it." Because even now, decades later, I carry her with me. The 12-year-old, the girl who ran, the girl who stayed quiet until the silence hurt more than the truth. She's never left. She walks beside me, and together we make noise. Sometimes people ask me, what was the hardest part? Leaving? Staying gone? Starting over? I tell them the truth. The hardest part was believing I deserved better. Once I did that, everything else followed. The bus ride, the notebook, the scholarship, the speeches, the daughter, the book, the life. It all started the day I decided not to die inside someone else's story. And if you're reading this, if you've carried something heavy for too long, let me be the one to tell you, you can put it down. It wasn't yours to carry. Not forever. You can leave. You can begin again. You can be louder than what tried to bury you. You can turn survival into fire. And fire gives off light. So let yourself burn bright. You were never born to be quiet.